Good evening. It's Thursday, August 10th, 2023. We are at the meeting of the Charles County Charter Board, and we'll begin with a roll call. Miss Jessie, can you help us with the roll call?
Of course. Okay, we have Chairman Waring,
Present.
Vice Chair Daughtery Butler Washington,
Present.
Ms. Cheryl Botts, Sarah
Present.
Hammett,
Present.
Marjorie Childs,
Here.
Mary Stokely,
Present.
Ramonda Davis, Christopher Harrington,
Here.
Eileen Lynch-Britt,
Present.
and our alternates, William Smith,
Present.
Michael White. And I did see Mr. White online. Okay, and James Crawford.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have quorum.
Thank you, Miss Jessie. First item up, approval of the minutes from the last Charter Board meeting. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes they received from county staff electronically? You also have them in your packet. Is there any discussion about the minutes from last meeting? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve them as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
And we'll take a roll call vote. We'll take a voice vote for approval of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? And the minutes from the July 27th Charter Board meeting are approved. We're fortunate today to have some subject matter experts on Charles County fire and EMS operations. And we're going to begin our meeting, instead of reviewing old business first, but to have a presentation from some individuals that can help us understand how Charles County's volunteer fire operations and their volunteer emergency services combined with some county support for emergency services, how that works in this county. So I would ask Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Lewis if they could please step forward. Thank you, gentlemen, for meeting with us today. We understand that you have a slide presentation that you'll be able to display for us and for those that are participating online. And what I'm hoping is, I'm hoping that we can get a basic education of how the system works here in Charles County. We heard from the Harford County executive in the previous meeting about their experience with volunteer fire, but also with the need over time to incorporate some county support to the volunteer emergency services component. And I think from what Sarah helped us understand in the previous meeting and some of our review is that that's somewhat similar or is similar to the system we currently have in place here in Charles County. So we think you're going to help us with that. And we also have a responsibility to ask some questions and understand, are there other types of systems that could work in Charles County as we review a charter document. So I ask that you help us with some basic education, that you'll be willing to take some questions that we have. And as we go through your slide deck, if it's okay, if we have some technical questions on some of the data that we see, if it's okay maybe to pause and maybe ask you a question in regards to a specific slide, but then at the end we can hopefully have a bigger conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Am I heard okay, Jesse? Am I in a good spot here? I know during the Board of Fire and Rescue meetings I struggle with the microphone, so.
How about me, Justin? Am I good over here?
I struggle myself, brother. I have to get down like this.
I'm okay. Let me adjust a little bit.
I get yelled at a lot now.
But Mr. Kaufman, Mr. Lewis, we'd be happy if you wanted to go ahead and get started with the
Yeah,
presentation.
absolutely. First and foremost, thank you for having us here. Chief Lewis and I are very thrilled to be here to represent all the volunteer fire and EMS in Charles County. And my name is Mark Kaufman. I'm the County Volunteer Fire Chief. I'm in year number 6 in this position, total of 27 years in Charles County as a volunteer, serving at La Plata Volunteer Fire Department. Not trying to show my age, but I just had a 16-year-old kid that just joined there as well. So, yeah. So my previous time there, and I still volunteer my time there, but this actually takes up a lot of my time. But there, I served through all the positions up to the assistant chief ranking, where I was there for 2 years. Outside of that, I'm a career fireman for the Naval District Washington Fire Department. I'm a captain. I'm assigned here in Indian Head, so just in the county. I don't have to go far anymore. I would also like to acknowledge our association president for the fireside, Rick Bowie, has joined us, and Director Michelle Lilly from the Department of Emergency Services has also attended with us today to show some support. So really glad to have her here, and I'll let Chief Lewis introduce himself.
Good evening, good evening. So Mitchell Lewis Jr. is my name. I am 1 year as EMS chief. I was 3 years as assistant chief prior to me taking this position. I've also moved up the ranks. I was been a volunteer for about 12 years now, so I worked my way up from starting from the bottom. I moved all the way up to chief. I am also a paid firefighter for Ronald Reagan National Airport, so I've been doing that for about 8 years as well. So I definitely spent a lot of time when I am off volunteering still to this day. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation, explaining you all how we operate.
If it's okay, if your plan was to walk through the slides, in their entirety, or if you think there are particular slides that we should highlight?
I think we can touch on some things in every slide. A lot of the numbers I can kind of breeze through, and obviously, as you said, if you have any questions, stop me. Please ask us some questions. We would love to entertain everything that you guys have, and if we don't have the answer, we'll definitely get it to you. So. Because there's not everything that, especially if you throw a hard curveball at me. So with the help of Jesse, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. Okay, so what is a volunteer fire and EMS department? So a volunteer fire and EMS department is a nonprofit corporation that is made up of citizens who serve as volunteer firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, who have joined a local station to provide fire suppression, basic and advanced life support, EMS, administrative support, and other types of emergency services. According to the National Volunteer Fire Council, 65% of all firefighters in the United States come from volunteer fire stations. Add a little note there that the federal government places the value of a volunteer's time at $31.80 per hour per person. So as we go through this and you see the total number of volunteers we have in the county and how the tax money comes to us and exactly the value of each individual, I think that will go a long way. So the Charles County Volunteer Firemen's Association is who I represent as the fire chief. So in 1929, the first volunteer fire department was chartered in the town of La Plata, which then served the entire, mostly rural Charles County until after World War II, when other communities started organizing their own fire departments. In 1952, the Charles County Volunteer Firemen's Association was established and organized, and this just brought the volunteer stations together to operate under one entity, and they also work to obtain paid dispatchers for the radio communication system in Charles County. And I noted here that this was the first radio dispatched emergency service system in the United States. So that happened here in Charles County.
So I represent Charles County Association of Emergency Medical Services. The first ambulance rescue squad was organized in La Plata in 1951. It was started by the Charles County Restaurant and Taverns Owners Association as an all-volunteer service. The Charles County government covered the operating costs of this new service until it was placed in the county's tax funding program in 1984. The Charles County Rescue Squad Association was formed in 1955 and was renamed the Charles County Association of Emergency Medical Services in 1976. In 1978, the Mobile Intensive Care Advanced Life Support Unit was organized by volunteers from other rescue squads and fire departments in the county. It was the first county-based all-volunteer medic unit in the state of Maryland. So basically, we operate with 19 stations, with 135 pieces of emergency apparatus and about 30 support utility vehicles.
So this this shows a breakdown of the type of apparatus that is currently in Charles County. We have 27 engines spread out between the 15 different stations. 5 aerial devices, which are ladder trucks, and they range from a tower, a tiller truck, or a straight truck. And if you want to paint the picture in your head, the tiller truck's the one that bends in the middle, that takes 2 drivers, and the tower's the one that usually has a bucket on it. Everything else is just a straight aerial truck. So we have 11 tankers, different types of tankers. They're commercial. We have some that are pumper tankers. And the reason why we have tankers in Charles County is because we have a lot of area that's rural that do not have fire hydrants. So we have to bring water to the scene of the incident. And what we do in an operation like that is once they dump their water on the scene, they go back to a fill site, they get water, and then they come back to the fire ground. We have 5 heavy-duty rescue squads that are positioned pretty much on the important parts of the highways. As you can see, Waldorf, Belle Alton, Potomac Heights for 210, Hughesville for Route 5, and 10th District, which is Marbury, covers the west side. Those primarily, we use those for the long-term extrications when people are trapped in their cars, and we run those on those types of incidents. They also carry a lot of specialty rope stuff, so they kind of support the special operation stuff that is later on in the slide. And we have 6 departments that have fire and rescue boats. That does not include the dive team because they have 3 individual boats themselves. And, of course, all those companies are positioned along the waterway for a quick response there. In addition to just the ordinary stuff that we call for the fire department, we have special operation discipline. So we have a confined space rescue team that runs out of Potomac Heights, trench and building collapse team that runs out of La Plata, a high-low angle rescue team that operates out of Waldorf, and we have a SWIFT/surface water rescue team, and those are positioned around the entire county between Marbury, Benedict, Cobb Island, and the dive team. We use them a lot when we get the heavy rains, the flooding events. We deploy those to help get people out of their cars or any other type of event, people in trees. We've had that happen as well. And then, of course, our underwater dive and rescue team, which is nationally known for the work that they do, and they get called to go help out federal government agencies all up down the East Coast to assist with recoveries. So they're a good team to have in this county.
So when there's a resident that's not familiar with how our system works, when they see a structure, when they go by a firehouse, a fire department, based on that slide with all the different type of resources, each department is not the same in what they have inside. If they have emergency medical services, if they
Correct.
have those rescue teams, they vary.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's 3 stations in this county that have just fire service alone in them. And their EMS station where the ambulance comes from may be a mile or 2 down the road. And those are things that was just put in place years ago, back during when everything was coming to, and every department has a different organization date. So sometimes originally, like as in the first slides, the fire department was founded in 1929, and there wasn't an ambulance in Charles County operated by an emergency entity until the 50s. So
So there's some legacy type operations.
yeah, so in some things, and there have been things that have changed that some have incorporated together, and there are some that haven't, and that's just, individual charters of their own and their buildings and their organizations. However, like you said, even if you drive by a fire station, if you drove by La Plata and then drove by Waldorf, there's actually different types of apparatus in that station. But one thing that comes out of every fire station is at least an engine, which is a fire truck that carries at least 6 guys, meets a certain minimum standard of how much water it carries, the pump capacity, and every station has an engine company at least to respond. And a lot of times you'll see maybe 2 in that department. And that is obviously for, when they have upstaffing of people, but also we don't have a county-wide reserve fleet. So a lot of times we share apparatus amongst each other, or if, say, Belle Alton, for example, they have 2 engines. If one engine goes out of service, they still have one there to respond to incidents with.
So volunteer EMS resources. So like I said, I'm in charge of the EMS side of things, and basically we have 29 ambulances staged in 15 different stations. So that's throughout the county. We have 29 ambulances. We also partner up with Department of Emergency Services, which we have an amazing relationship with as well. So Hughesville has 2 ambulances, which one consists of an ALS career crew. So we have 1 volunteer ambulance, or 2 volunteer career, 2 emergency advanced life support. So we have basic life support, which is BLS, which is basically your EMTs, and you have advanced life support, which is advanced your paramedics. Okay, so each station has 2 volunteer ambulances, but our career staffs a certain amount of ambulance in that station. So Waldorf has 4, which consist of 2 ALS career crews that staffs 2 of them ambulances. Benedict has 1, Cobb Island has 2, Potomac Heights has 2. 10th District has 2, which consists of 1 ALS career crew inside of that station. Indian Head has one, Bell Alton has one, Bryan's Road has two, which is one ALS career crew. Westlake, which is one ALS career crew as well. Newburgh has two ambulances, which is one ALS career crew, and Dennisville, which has one volunteer ambulance. Now we have a Charles County Rescue Squad as well, which is in La Plata. They have one ALS career crew. Ironsides, which is further down the south area, has two. And our Charles County MICU, which is the medic volunteer station that we have in Waldorf, which also has one ALS and BLS career crew in that particular station. Yes, that's what Direct Mobility Road across from Altamont Place. We also have two mass casualties in case we have a mass incident, a type of bus incident or something that can consist of a large amount of people that are being injured. We have two mass casualty units, one at Waldorf and one at Ironsides 58. So we just have literally totally 29 ambulances. And just like Fireside, if a piece breaks down, we will plug and play from each other, right? Take one unit from another station if need be, just to make sure we keep that station with a unit so we can respond to calls in that particular area, if that makes sense. So like I was saying, our volunteer with Career EMS support, the association's leadership went to Charles County commissioners in 1995 for help, of course, because the calls demanded more help. Were high in response, success rates were dropping. A SWAT process was initiated by the state's medical director and volunteers steering towards integrated career EMS that currently in place today. The results have shown higher success rates and quicker response times for EMS resources. As we all know, as more places, houses continue being built, the call volume continues to increase. So the call volume is absolutely increased tremendously since how it used to be prior.
How do you define what is a success rate compared to a quicker response time? What does success rate mean?
So basically, success rate means how many times that particular unit gets out of that house,
Okay.
right? So if a call dispatcher for that station, it may not be a particular unit, crew available, volunteer crew.
Okay.
Now, our ALS station, the ones that have the ALS career crew, always are staffing that particular station, right? So that's our success rate. Was that a question you had?
So does that mean that if there's a call, maybe that crew can't leave from that station, but the call is answered, but it might be from a different?
No, they already had left from that station. So prime example, if a call like Waldorf is very, very busy.
Yep.
So if a call hits Waldorf area, at particular, let's say Station 3, which is over by Benjamin Stoddard, St. Ignatius Drive, and they get like 4 or 5 911 calls back to back to back to back, then them 4 units is now empty house, and they'll now pull from another station, right? Even though that's still first due, may still get pulled because they're still going to dispatch.
Okay.
And they'll just start pulling from the next closest due.
Okay.
I have a question. You say in 1995 you went to the commissioners for help. What help were you seeking, and what help did they provide?
So when they did the SWOT analysis was to show that the volunteers weren't able to keep up with the responses, that the demand that was there. So they went to the county and said, hey, we need help. And the response was to hire people to run the ambulance. So that was done over 20 years ago. And as time has gone on, we continue to work with the Department of Emergency Services, which is the county, and to continue to ensure that we're meeting the demand that's coming in. Unfortunately, Director Lilly and Deputy Director Rose did a really good presentation to the commissioners, and this previous year, which was something that Chief Lewis and I were involved in, and we were asking for a lot of help, and we did not get a lot of help. So as the demand rises, we're still asking for the help. And as we get to the next slide, I mean, we'll show you the numbers, the increase over the last 10 years, and that includes how the success rates actually work.
So my ask is the presentation that was presented to the commissioners, if you can forward that to the board.
Yes, ma'am.
We can
We
review
can.
that.
We can try to dig that up.
Okay.
Yep.
And then secondly, am I understanding the EMS portion is a hybrid with career professionals?
Correct.
And volunteer.
Correct.
And the help you were asking was for additional resources to maybe build up the career side of
Correct.
the EMS portion. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So here for emergency call response rates, what you see here is 100% of the fire and special operation calls are answered by the volunteer association stations. So for fiscal year 23, our year runs July 1 to June 30th for the volunteer associations. So there were called for 15,630 fire calls with an overall success rate of 98.76%. And the reason why that number is not 100, and there'll never be 100, is because there's going to be times that we're on calls. We have 2 or 3 pieces out from each station. Maybe we're operating on a fire, and we have other departments that come in and fill in from us out of county. Prince George's, Calvert, St. Mary's, even as far as other COG jurisdictions come in, that will help us out as well. So I don't want to say it's impossible to be 100%, but when we're pulling 2 or 3 pieces out of one station and backfilling them with, say, a St. Mary's County or a Calvert company, our own departments aren't getting responses for that credit. So, but as you can see for the fire side, the success rate, remains pretty much consistently over the last 10 years, even though with an increase of an average about 2,000 calls per year. As Chief Lewis said earlier, we build more homes, we create more traffic. So we have more fire alarms, more structure fires, motor vehicle accidents. And one of the other things that over the last 2 years the fire department has taken on is public service calls, which we took that away from EMS because there just wasn't enough ambulances to spread out to run these assisted public calls. And those are things that if people have fallen and not injured, we get some really random calls to check people's electric. We get calls to check people's plumbing. We get calls to find somebody's medication, empty dishwashers. We really get some random ones. And unfortunately, we had to take that away from EMS because, we were running, 80 to 100 EMS calls a day. We didn't have the staffing. The fire department took that load on. And that is actually kind of wearing on our people as well, too. It's because people abuse that system. And it's not necessarily the people. And I don't want to point the fingers at them. There's places that we go to twice a day to help somebody out of their house and get back into their house because they're going to a doctor's appointment. And they've ordered a stair lift to get them up and down their steps. But unfortunately, they're fighting an insurance company or they're fighting Medicaid or whatever it may be. And it's 6 to 9 months before they get the equipment they need. And in the interim, we're the answer. So, it's something, like I said, we've been doing now, I think, for 18 months, 2 years, Michelle. So it took the load off EMS. It put it on the fire side. But it is something that we are actively looking at with the Department of Emergency Services of finding another option for this because we're starting to get to the point now, as you can see, the fire calls increase. And, if we have a fire truck that's out running calls, we've been in situations where those people are waiting 30, 40 minutes to get help because we're calling stations from further away because the emergency calls are coming in and we have to take an emergency call before a non-emergency call. So,
has there been any discussion, internally or within the county on how to sort of deal with those particular calls? Like I know other fire departments and EMS departments are exploring sort of like caseworkers, right,
Yep.
who could be assigned to someone rather than you all coming out and diverting your attention from larger emergencies, right, that there would be a smaller group of people that can handle some of those non-emergencies.
So we do in the county. It's called the Mobile Integrated Health. They fall under the Department of Emergency Services. It's a really good team. There's only one crew. And we submit information to them. They go and they'll follow up with those people and see if they want help or if there's help that we can provide them. They are exploring options of getting additional crews. But also one of the other kind of complicated things that come into play is if the people don't want the help, they don't have to take it. So, and at the end of the day, when they dial 911, we have to answer the call, and that's what we do.
So,
May I ask
I'm
a
sorry,
question?
sure.
I looked ahead on the slides. I don't think I see it. The career crews, how many people are on a crew? And because I know you're there 24 hours a day, so how many people are you talking?
So each career ambulance has a total of 2 personnel, which is 1 basic life support and 1 advanced life support personnel. So it's 2 career members on a career crew in a 24-hour period. Now, it could be 3, and there may be 1 person that's in training, so they may have a 3rd person on board, but typically it's 2 people.
So does that mean that those two people, are they they're in a crew, but does that mean they go out together? Or
Yes.
They just,
So it's two people. One person is not typically the driver, and one person is in the passenger seat, which is typically your paramedic or EMT, which is an officer. And they go out every call with two people.
and is that like just during the day?
That's 24 hours.
So
Yes.
you have more than one. Well, you say you have one crew, but is it like 4 people, like 2 crews, or just?
Yeah, it's just that one crew. So it's
But they're not there all the
interesting.
time.
So
Okay.
so what happens is if they'll get dispatched for one call, they'll take that call, they clear the call, and if they get dispatched for another, they go to the next call. That call happens for a 24-hour period. So once they clear a call, they can get dispatched for another call, and they just keep going back and forth, back and forth. So it's just that one crew for that 24-hour time period.
And then you just fill in the gaps with volunteers.
Correct. Or volunteers may respond with them depending on the personnel signed up for duty hours, basically,
Okay.
for a certain time period during the day.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So EMS calls are answered by career and volunteer personnel, which is that hybrid system. So as you see, we have a total of 24,826 overall, with an overall 90.56 success rate, which I think is still great to be in the 90% success rate with that many calls. And as you guys see over the year, the calls just continue to increase, right? So it's a matter of they're just going to keep increasing because of everything that's been happening in the building. It's nonstop. So 911 calls is not going to stop.
And you mentioned clearing the call, and I think I had this experience with my father recently when he was transported to Charles Regional, and when I arrived, the unit was still there with him because he had not yet received a bed in the ER.
Yeah,
That unit is out of service.
yes. So that's a whole different topic.
That impacts your success rate. That impacts your success rate because then there's no ambulance from that facility that can then take the next call.
Correct.
Then you're pulling from other.
Yes. That's. I'm glad you brought it up because we're facing a real big dent in our system due to the lack of time units are being at the hospital. The response release time, right? So we'll have a crew there for a matter of sometimes up to 3 hours, 4 hours, right, holding the wall waiting for a bed, right? And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do on our end. We can't leave that patient there because we cannot pass over. We have to do a turnover to the nurse, whoever's changeover. Yes, correct. So we can't leave that patient until we are relieved of their duties, basic per se. So that's another reason that has hit on our success rate because now that crew that normally will respond to that call in that area is stuck at the hospital, so they can't respond due to them being there. So 77% of EMS calls answered by career staff, and 23% of EMS calls answered by volunteers. And as I said, as you see, it just shows that the calls continue to increase as the years go by. But one thing that Chief Kaufman did say is no call goes unanswered. Right, every single 911 call that gets dispatched, every single 911 call gets a person respond to that call.
So these are the total number of responses ran by each fire station within Charles County. I'm going to bore you, I think, with reading individual numbers, but what we can highlight here is that when you look at Waldorf, Westlake, La Plata, those areas are pretty high in response numbers. As you can see, Waldorf's pushing over 4,000 calls. In comparison to some of our more rural areas that you look at, like Indian Head, Benedict, Cobb Island, Nanjamore, their numbers are extremely lower.
The Waldorf as an area
Yes.
is even larger than the 4,000 if you add the two houses, right?
Yes, exactly. So, and it's two houses, they run individual, technically, but they are one organization. And in addition to that, as the Waldorf area has expanded down to Parkway, that's kind of where you get the increase with La Plata, and then La Plata responds right up there now. It's a lot closer. And even so, Bryan's Road, I mean, that community, there's a lot of development over there that's moving forward. So, as we said earlier, the more people we bring into the county, the more calls we're going to have to answer.
Is there any sort of correlation between, it doesn't sound like there is, but I think it's worth noting, the population growth and investment in capital dollars? None. Okay. I just wanted to note that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go over some budget stuff here in a little bit.
So this is basically just going over the EMS station and the calls as well, ran by each station and throughout the county. And as you guys can see, Waldorf is almost 9,000 calls. And by the time this year is over, it'll be over 10,000. All right, so that's just be mindful that that's a a lot of calls just for Waldorf alone. So that's basically just different calls around that areas.
Oh yeah. So funding. So the history of the fire tax. So originally the fire departments were funded through legislation with funds that were collected from slot machine permits. So I don't remember that time, so I can't speak to that. So the efforts of the volunteers to obtain a fire tax were realized in 1965 when 1 mil, which is 0.10 cents of the fire tax, was approved by the by the legislation in Annapolis. In 1966, the tax rate was changed to 0.15 per $100 of assessed property value. This was to provide guaranteed funding to the rescue squad organizations in Charles County. In the early 70s, the county commissioners agreed to take on the responsibility for the tax funding. So 1 cent was added in 1972 to provide the funding of the Length of Service Award Program, which we refer to as LOSAP, which is a retirement program that's established for volunteers of Charles County. And I'll put a little note here, Charles County was the third in the state for this retirement to come into play. And what this does is, we'll go over a little bit more, but it's kind of an incentive for being a volunteer in Charles County. Once you've reached 25 years and you've done your LOSAP time and you've actually put in the time, and we have ways to track that, and we'll go over that later. So in 2002, the formula was changed to what it is today, which is a total of 6.4 cents per $100 of an actual property assessment. 4 cents goes to fire, 2 cents goes to EMS, and the 0.4 goes into our LOSAP investment fund. There has been no increase to the fire tax since 2002. So we haven't asked for it. We've, as we go on later, as we go over some things, we've kind of just worked with what we had. I mean, we knew everybody was in some penny time, everybody's crunching the dollar there. So we made some changes internally to make sure that our dollar went a long way. And it's been a rough 21 years, 22 years to say the least to from where we are now. Correct. This is only for that. And we have escrow accounts that money has to go into for apparatus, for building, and that's what that money is used for. And that's the way it's been for years. So, and one thing we talk about later on down the road is that we have some of the state-of-art facilities. We have state-of-the-art apparatus. They're very safe. They're top-notch that industry has. And that's because of the process that's been put in place back in the 60s. Has dedicated that escrow money so that we put that money there. So when it comes time for us to replace apparatus, we have the money to do it. Most departments are not taking loans out unless they really have to. And even if they do, they do it through their own program where they're not costing the taxpayers any more money by paying interest or anything like that. So we do a lot of things internally so that way we don't cost the taxpayers any more money, which has included not increasing the fire tax in the county. And at the bottom there's the Chapter 54 under the Code of Public Local Law that talks about the fire tax and also talks about like how we receive it, the standards we have to meet for apparatus, officers, stations, and everything to make sure that we're in compliance every year, and if we're not, then our money doesn't get issued to us. So it's very tightly managed.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you said the last increase was in 2002.
Yes, ma'am.
I without telling my age, I've been around, and I know that I'm assuming that the cost to do business, to run your machines, and the gas prices, and everything that
Yes, ma'am.
is affecting the everyday
Yep.
taxpayer, you all are experiencing as well.
Most
Correct.
definitely.
Absolutely.
Are there any concessions or anything that's provided for like those operational costs by the county or through tax breaks or anything like that?
So one of the biggest things that is fundraising. Individual departments do fundraising for non-tax money, and that's always kind of been big, right? Unfortunately, that took a big hit during COVID when nobody could, Now you saw online raffles come about. That helped supplement a little bit. Departments are obviously back to doing business and trying to get that, but they're still playing catch up. Departments have always saved money. It seems like every department in this county and all of our money and everything is reviewed by the county. So we have to do audits every year. So obviously, we know where our money is going, and everybody knows where our money is going. It's completely transparent. But there's also times where people have decided not to replace a piece of apparatus because of money, or they've delayed it. And, we've seen people delay replacing apparatus up to 5 years just to ensure they have the money in the bank account. So it's very fiscally responsible in that aspect. But in addition, when you prolong the life of a piece of apparatus, now you're creating maintenance costs, and that's another thing. And we're at the point right now where we're having departments look at buying apparatus early because manufacturers are taking up to 36 to 38 months to build a fire truck. So that's created an impact as well, and it's like you said, everything has gone up. Fuel, just a simple oil change. We have to buy gear. NFPA says we replace gear every 10 years, right? So that way we're keeping our people safe. And the timeline to replace gear now, it takes over 12 to 14 months just to get a set of gear in, and that increase has gone up 250%. So, and all this is being managed the best that we can, and sooner or later, as we go through, as you'll see, it's going to have to happen. We're going to have the discussion that something needs to be done to ensure that we can keep providing the best equipment, the best apparatus, the best buildings, and make sure that our people are protected so that we can, efficiently answer calls and, keep the public safe.
Something done as in rates or other support from the county? Are those sort of like the levers that we're talking about?
Yeah, so, nothing really could be done unless you touch Chapter 54.
Got it.
Because that's the law, and that's the law that governs our tax money.
Right.
So,
May I ask a question really quick before you?
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the previous slide, you mentioned in the early 70s, the county commissioners agreed to take responsibility for the tax funding. What does that take responsibility means? That they manage it?
Yeah, so that's when they had to write a law, because other than that, it was run through the state legislation.
Okay.
Because when they got the money through the permits and stuff like that. So I believe that's exactly when the code was written of
Okay.
how we're going to do the standards, how we're going to distribute the money and all that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question regarding Chapter 54. Is that a state ordinance or a local ordinance?
Local.
One quick question on funding, I think just for clarity. So the 6.4 cents is based off of assessed value for all the properties within the county, correct?
Correct.
So in reality, the actual money that's levied from that 6.4 cents is increasing over time as more houses are built, as assessed values, everyone's property goes up in value over time, right? So that's increasing, but what you're saying is that the increase associated with that revenue stream is not keeping up with the cost on your end.
Correct.
Okay.
And also, if you go back to, obviously, talking about not having anything since 2002, back in the 2010 to 12 time frame where they didn't want to call it a recession, but everything kind of tanked a bit, and people stopped paying taxes. We had a lot of foreclosures. We took a huge hit during that time because obviously our revenue would have came from that.
No, makes sense. And then the other point is that 6.4 cents, is that largely funding operating needs on your end, or is that operating that's everything?
That's everything.
So you don't get anything through the capital budget per similar
No.
other.
No, sir.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to say a question. Okay. I can remember when everybody else was going through foreclosures and stuff, but Charles County didn't really go through foreclosure because everything stayed the same. Because our taxes didn't go down, our taxes didn't do anything. We stayed the same.
Yeah.
Our stuff stayed up because we didn't get that break that everybody in Maryland got that break. We didn't get that break.
Yeah,
So we kind of.
And our percentage went down of what we received in. So like you said,
We didn't receive any break. Wonder why everybody got breaks and our taxes was like, what's going on here?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so who manages all this? So the volunteers do. So not only do we have operational members, we have administrative members, we have bankers, we have lawyers, we have all kinds of people that help us do these things. So we have our buildings, new construction and maintenance. We have approval process for those. They all have to start at the department level. So the membership, because it's a nonprofit organization, the membership has to agree to everything the departments do when it comes to capital expenses. So the department, the board, their board of directors, and it works all the way up to the Board of Fire and Rescue. Same thing with the apparatus. We do training. We use University of Maryland, Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute as our primary training. We do in-house training as well. We take care of all administrative processes and records, personnel matters, budgets, audits, any strategic planning, public education, and fire prevention.
Quick question. You said you're a nonprofit organization. Are you a 501c3?
Yes. So our capital expense approval process. So this is anything we do that's going to require us to spend the escrow money from apparatus, building buildings, doing large maintenance projects on buildings. So the first step, it's a department approval. It goes through the company's board of directors and their membership. Anything that's operational that needs to be approved goes through the county volunteer chiefs, which they meet once a month. This is for all new programs and apparatus. And when we talk about programs, most recently we just added Cobb Island into the Swift Water team. They had all the personnel meet the training requirements, equipment. So those things go through the process too. So if we're standing up any extra equipment or entity in the county, it follows the exact same process. After that, it has to go through the approval of the Fire and EMS Executive Committee. Depending on where the money comes from, if it's Fire and EMS, it could go through both or just Fire or EMS, depending on the apparatus or if it's a building. And then the final step, it gets approved at the Board of Fire and Rescue, which I'll show you the makeup of the Board of Fire and Rescue later. And with each purchase request, the company requesting the purchase must also produce how they're going to pay for it, a disposal plan for any apparatus they're getting rid of, a copy of their financial statement and from the previous year of an annual statement, and then one within 90 days. So our executive committees, we have two board of trustees or committee chairmen, one for fire, one for EMS, and they serve on the Board of Fire and Rescue. Each fire department and rescue squad has delegates that serve on this entire big executive committee, and they meet once a month as well to review the capital expenditures and stuff like that, vehicles and buildings. They also review previous year's expenses. They establish new budgets. We do this every July. We have a budget meeting. Fire goes first and EMS, and then that goes through an approval process, and then the final approvals at the Board of Fire and Rescue in September. And all audit reports are submitted to the county commissioners, which is required by law, which was actually implemented by the fire and EMS associations. We were the ones that went to the county and said, we need a law to govern ourselves to make sure that we're showing that we're spending our money appropriately.
So in the county's budget process, or at least in the budget documents that they produce that show by fiscal year revenue and expenditures, I can find in that document the fire revenue. I think I also see some EMS revenue in there as well. Are your expenditures showing at all in any of the county?
I don't know if it shows on that report itself.
Okay.
I know the individual audits that we turn in, I would assume fiscal would have all that information.
Okay, but I think what I'm hearing is the county is receiving information from you all, but they aren't directly involved from budget development through approval.
Correct.
They're receiving the end product.
Correct. Okay. So the Board of Fire and Rescue Commission was established by the Fire and Rescue tax laws. Our Board of Fire and Rescue Commission is made up of our two chairmen from Fire and EMS, one county commissioner, which currently is Commissioner Bowling, two delegates that are appointed by the county commissioner's office, and two delegates appointed by the governor's office. They meet the third Thursday of every month in a public session to review requests, reports, and investigate any new requests. They have the final approval on all matters dealing with tax funds. And the board is also the final appeal process for issues that involve standard compliance, and administrative and operational concerns.
So with a sitting commissioner and some delegates appointed by the commissioners on the board, I guess to kind of answer my own question, there is involvement to that degree.
Correct. Yes. Yes, and they vote on everything, and we sit in this room now, obviously, and the departments that are bringing their request in, they sit where Chief Lewis and I are sitting, and they, get any questions answered or, whatever it may be. If they have questions, concerns, comments, the board brings it to them, and they're the final say on it.
Does that acting commissioner get any say, or the ability to provide feedback or a vote or anything?
Yes. Yeah, the commissioner does have a vote. So our budget process. So each year, as our previously stated, we prepare a budget and we present it to the Board of Fire and Rescue Commission. So they're the ones that will approve the final end of the year, what we're presenting to them of how our money comes in and what we're doing with our money. So we review each line item, which includes the apparatus cost, building cost, equipment cost, personnel insurance, and anything that deals with maintenance and stuff like that. So last year, the Fire Association, the final budget that we distributed amongst the departments was 83% of what was actually brought in. And for EMS, it was 80.58. And the reason why that is, we always start at 100%, right, of the total number that we get. And then we have to take things off the top of the budget, things that fund our high school cadet program. We do a tuition reimbursement, scholarship program, our special operations accounts, our mobile display terminals, which is our computers and the apparatus. We have a health and safety program and public education. All that stuff comes off the top of the budget before we can actually distribute money to everybody else. So even though you see maybe the fire side's getting $8.5 million, that's not as exactly what's being distributed amongst the 15 companies, because we had to take money to put in other escrow accounts that we have, that we fund as the association. So here's a quick snapshot of some of the money that we take out. So every year we put approximately $20,000 into a health and safety account. Our cadet program for the high school cadets is $10,000. $15,000 for tuition reimbursement. We have a volunteer fire and EMS coordinator that we've had employed for, I think, 8 or 9 years now. I'm not really sure. But we have to pay a salary for that. Public education, $8,000. The mobile display terminals, $364,000, and that's annually. So we have annual operating costs with those, and then we have to escrow money to buy new computers every 5 to 6 years, just like we all have to do for our homes, right? The technology goes bad or, is outdated. Pretty much when you buy it, it's outdated. So, and then we have a countywide reporting system that we use we have to submit all of our calls to the state fire marshal's office. So we have to pay for a program for that, and that also helps us track our LoSAP. So here's a breakdown of last year, the fire tax. The total that was distributed was $13,280,100. As you can see, we've broken it down into the fire, EMS, and the LoSAP portion. This is the breakdown of of what was distributed to each department. So this includes everything: what has to go into escrow account for their apparatus, and what has to go in escrow for building. Yes. This is for EMS. It's the same thing. They have the same thing. They have escrow accounts for their ambulances, their buildings, their operating costs, all that stuff.
Page 28.
So our length of service program, what we call as LoSAP. So in 1972, a 0.01 cent tax was added to the fire tax to provide funding resource for the length of service award program. It's a retirement program established for the volunteers of Charles County. As stated before, we were the third in the state to establish this retirement system for the volunteers. So to collect the LoSAP, you must be at least 60 years old and have accumulated 50 points per year for no less than 25 years of service. So a qualified volunteer may receive a minimum benefit of $250 per month for the rest of their life. They'll get an additional $10 for every year that they do over 25 years. So in order to obtain their 50 points, you get points for running calls, you get points for attending drills, business meetings, department events, county meetings, whatever it may be. And that's all. Each department has a LoSAP coordinator. The LoSAP board meets here monthly as well, and all that information is put together. And I think she's been a part of it before in the past. It's a lot of work to manage that. So volunteers who receive their LoSAP benefit may continue to be active and qualify for additional funds. They can continue to increase their annual benefit. There is an option to withdraw early at the age of 55, but they only get 75% of the benefit instead of the 100%. In addition, we have a $5,000 death benefit that we added several years ago for any volunteer who has been active for at least 1 year in the volunteer service. So if we have an active volunteer who passes away, the family gets a death benefit of $5,000 to help with associated funeral costs and stuff like that.
All right, membership in the station. So currently, there are about 1,019 people who volunteer their time to provide membership support and some level of service in the 19 county stations. So just to reiterate, these are members that are coming from work, right, and they're volunteering their time to serve a duty for the county. And that consists of fire, EMS, special operations, administrative officers, fire prevention, education, fundraising, mechanics, building maintenance, human resources and recruitment, health and safety, and et cetera, which is all volunteers. Now, there are about 910 members, or about 89% are considered active fire, EMS, and special operations, responders, writing apparatus, and answering 911 calls. So you have guys that are like life members, so they may not be in that active status, but we do have, out of that 1,019, we have 910 active members that are currently running calls on a daily basis.
Of that membership, and I might have missed this if you said this earlier, what percentage of your volunteers are also career, perhaps in another jurisdiction?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know that.
I don't have the exact numbers on that.
Yeah, me neither.
If I had to take a quick off-the-hip guesstimate, it's probably 75 to 80. And that's pretty much the same thing for a lot of our department officers. The majority of them are officers in career organizations as well.
Is it 75 to 80 and not in the 90s because there's a training component and perhaps they haven't been hired by a career?
So a lot of times what happens is volunteers, when they come in at a young age, and I'll use myself for example, I attended the cadet program and I received the minimum amount of training when I graduated, by the time I graduated high school. So when I turned 18, I got a career job. So that's kind of, I'd hate to see, you get more people start volunteering and then get hired, especially nowadays. There's a lot of career departments because they're losing people really quickly, and career departments can't even hire people fast enough. So they look for people with training, run them through an accelerated academy, and then get them on the street. So they're looking for volunteers with experience in the training already. So yeah, we definitely do produce a lot. And unfortunately, we also lose volunteers that way too. Once some people get a career job, it becomes, taxing when you have a family. Sometimes second jobs, things have changed. Everybody's working, the husband, the wife, everybody's at work. So sometimes we lose people because unfortunately, we just don't have the incentives to keep them right now, like other jurisdictions, and we'll touch on that later. But we do the best we can to keep them in this county. Yeah. We definitely do.
Yeah, because I'm a person as well who took advantage of the volunteer to get career because I was able to receive all the classes and the training to be able to take them to the next level. So this one right here just goes over the demographics of the average age that we have that volunteer in the membership. So that basically covers the average age of each group. All right, so basically how does Charles County Fire and EMS budget compare to other jurisdictions? Okay, next slide. All right, so budget costs of other combined jurisdictions, okay? So Prince George's County, Maryland, we're all familiar with PG. Now, the total fire EMS budget is 240,391,800. That was 2023 approved. Now, out of that, 206,810,900 of which is dedicated to personnel expenses. Okay. Now, Frederick County, their total fire EMS budget, 949,931. And basically 71 million of that, 287,690 of which is dedicated to their personnel expenses. Washington County, 5,292,030, and that is 4,805,640 went to their personnel expenses. Now, 44 personnel only staffing for 3 stations and part-time. Charles County. All right, so total volunteer fire and EMS budget is 13,280,100. And that is, out of that, 0 is dedicated to personnel expenses, which is basically we're saving Charles County. Gotta see how much we're saving. I don't even have to.
I hear you on that point, but we know since '95 the county has now supported EMS.
Correct.
If I'm looking at some of these other counties, are we looking at a mix, a hybrid career and volunteer in some of these numbers? Are these only career?
So Prince George's County, it's very, very little volunteer, but they still do have some.
Okay.
And they also have probably 3 times the amount of stations that we have.
Sure.
However, don't want to say it's a good snapshot, but it's the county just north to us.
Sure.
And, as we're building, we know we're getting, people move down south. People are getting out of D.C., and maybe they want to get out of the city environment, and they're coming down this way. So we tend to think more people are moving south is what the trend that we've been seeing, based off of talking to people when they move in the area, because a lot of people, when we respond to a call, they assume we're getting paid to be there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them look at us and go, oh, I just moved from Hyattsville, and I know it's a paid department, So
Yeah.
Frederick County, they're a mix of career and volunteer, but all these jurisdictions are paying firefighters.
But we're looking here at fire and EMS, and if I'm thinking about apples to apples, wouldn't the Charles County number include the 17 million for
Correct.
for emergency services?
That's
So
correct.
that number would go up to about 30 million or so if we're just counting.
Correct.
And then instead of 0 dedicated for personnel expenses, we would have 17 million in that line.
For the career side, correct. And now the Department of Emergency Services, their budget also includes animal control, dispatchers.
So that's a larger
So
26.
yeah, that's a larger number. If you broke it down to just the EMS,
Right.
I don't know the numbers, and I don't want to call Michelle to the carpet right here in
That's-
front of you
that's-
guys to answer that question.
But I'm just conceptually speaking, if we're going to be apples to apples, I think that number should be 30 million and then 17 million dedicated to personnel expenses because we have a hybrid system.
Correct.
EMS side. So if we're going to be fair in how we compare, I'm not saying you're being unfair, but if I want to be apples to apples, I think those numbers should be there. And say that Charles County is paying. Yes, volunteers are providing significant savings, but we are paying.
Correct. Yes.
Taxpayers paying.
Yes.
Do you know offhand how Harford County, what their breakup could look like? I know we didn't ask you specific counties to think about, but I wonder if you know how they would compare.
I think Hartford is still operating with most volunteers.
Okay.
Yeah. I have people that I work with actually that still volunteer, but I think their fire is mostly volunteer still. Okay. I think the EMS is the same. It's a hybrid system. Okay. Most places you see now, the EMS is the first to go to the hybrid side of things, of career volunteer.
That's exactly what Harford was saying, that's what the problem is.
And Washington County looked at them real quickly only because they were just starting to ask for support on the fire side. Okay. And the limited, their station number, their count is identical to ours, so they're operating pretty much the same amount of departments as we are. Mm-hmm. And the little bit of what they're dedicating just to fire personnel is that number only.
So the 17 million that I saw for FY24 approved budget for emergency services, only for the career EMS portion, I'm assuming that's staff. I don't know if there's other admin. There was about a $3 million increase over FY23. And you mentioned you did a presentation, you didn't quite get what you asked for and needed, but was that $3 million increase, was that dedicated for staffing, for additional?
It was for staffing for EMS units. I believe they also got some administrative support approved in that budget as well.
So there is some admin and some other resources?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Correct, Michelle?
I was just going to, if I could, just briefly. Hi, Elizabeth Theobald. I'm really sitting in for Deb Hall. You're asking some really great questions about how it is that the entire system works together. And I think perhaps you may want to, and like I said, no, I don't want to put Michelle Lilly out there today, but maybe you'd want to hear from her at another meeting to just also supplementary, fill in some additional information as well. It's a great partnership that they have in order to make sure it is that all of our fire and rescue needs are met. And I think it's helpful to hear all of it. So I appreciate the questions that you're asking. I believe Miss Lilly will be prepared to if you invite her in at another point.
No, I think that's a great suggestion. I think we're going to talk about in the new business section some conversations we're having with staff about having budget, and some others come present for us, where we can take a holistic view of the county's budget. But I think having Michelle, and I'm sorry I didn't get to say hello to you earlier, having Michelle talk to us in this setting and perhaps in a working group setting would be really useful for us.
So our recruitment efforts, so right now we have individual stations do some recruiting, and we also have some countywide initiatives. A lot of it is done by word of mouth. You get a lot of families that join, as I previously stated, even my own family. As much as I know how dangerous this job is, and we get reminded every day, we don't want our family involved. We do some website marketing. We recruit at the county fair. Our fire and EMS stations have open houses. We do some advertising through the Board of Fire and Rescue meetings, at the Blue Crabs games, social media, of course, and some TV commercials on the local government channel. And a note here that we did submit through the SAFER grant to hire a recruitment and retention coordinator, because that is definitely an area that we know that we kind of suffer in and that we need to support. Dedicating time and somebody with expertise to that is very hard on a supplement thing, especially when somebody has something else to do. So some of the benefits to being a volunteer. So through the state of Maryland, they have a death benefit as well. Unfortunately, if somebody was killed in the line of duty, there's benefits for people who become disabled while hurt in the line of duty. They have benefits for widows or widowers and dependent children and other dependents. That's a public safety annotated code through the state of Maryland. Excuse me. There's education support for dependent children of permanently disabled or deceased volunteer. In Charles County, we offer free training. We have LoSAP. We have the high school cadet program, which has been really successful for us. We average anywhere between 15 to 22 high school students that we run through that annually. In addition to some other scholarship opportunities, I won't read every single one of them, but the state has a few. The Shock Trauma Center has some for some EMS scholarships. And in Charles County, what we do in particular is we do a tuition and book reimbursement of $1,500. The individual to receive that money has to put in 24 hours of in-station duty per month to receive that at the end, and they obviously have to successfully complete the course. In addition, for the cadets, we have a Justin Hutchinson scholarship program that they can receive. The top cadet receives that at the end of the year, and that's named after Justin Hutchinson, who he attended the second cadet program with myself. He was tragically killed by a drunk driver in a car accident a couple years after graduating.
All right. These are accomplishments that we have had. Residential fire sprinkler ordinance implemented. Rural fire suppression water supplies or requirements for large subdivisions, currently reviewing with PGM. A combined fire EMS volunteer career standard operating guidelines approved and adopted. Uniform fire EMS rescue officer training requirements approved and implemented for chief officers. Implementation of National Incident Management System. County-wide special operations services implemented and placed in service throughout the county. So we have surface swift water rescue, high-low angle rescue, confined space rescue, trench and collapse rescue. Next slide. A continuation of some more accomplishments. Utilization of a county-wide LoSAP training report and incident reporting system. Safe and state-of-the-art facilities and apparatus for first responders. Implementation of mobile display terminals, MDTs, to assist personnel in the field. Implemented a county-wide safety program. initiate a development site plan review tracking system to reduce inconsistencies and wait times, completed a comprehensive study in conjunction county government, successfully placed in service a fire station in the Densville community. We also implemented a standard of conduct for all personnel. The standard of conduct mirrors that of county's code of conduct. So basically create a procedure to hold individuals accountable if the standard of conduct was broken. 3-step disciplinary process if needed. Station review, accountability board, and board of fire rescue. Also accountability board made up personnel elected and appointed from operational and administrative members.
Are these all recent accomplishments, like in the last year or like 10 years, or like NIMS? I know that's been around for a while.
Yeah, so some of these are probably anywhere between now till 8 to 10 years ago,
Okay.
especially with some of the stuff and the work that we've done with the county, yes.
Thanks.
So the future moving forward for us, so we're looking to expand our training initiatives internally to better prepare our personnel for incidents. One of the things that we're doing there is we just approved a incident simulation training software that we're going to offer up to all the departments and to be a requirement for chief officers to complete. We're going to examine and consider the feasibility and cost effectiveness of implementing a system for standard purchasing and procurement. It's already being done for EMS with their supplies. A lot of them piggyback off of the COG bid, and we've done that as well for some of the SCBA purchases. But we're looking to do something more robust with equipment internally in Charles County. Continue our relationship with the Volunteer Association leadership and the county's Department of Emergency Services leadership. In transparency, this suffered in previous administrations but has vastly improved. And that's fortunately with the new administration in place, the working relationship we have is phenomenal, and it's better than it has ever been. And I've lived through previous ones. So we're going to formulate a mid-range and long-term fire and EMS operational resource plan to meet the projected growth and demands of fire and EMS needs. And that's kind of a joint thing that we've been working with the Department of Emergency Services on. And even the commissioners have kind of asked that upon us anyways to start looking at that to know how we're going to plan for the future, right? We know the growth is still coming. It's here. What are we doing to meet that need? Continue to work through legislation to provide property tax credits for active volunteers. Develop and recommend a standard fire and EMS site plan guide for developer requirements. We want to codify best practices, not just the minimum code requirements. And some of that is legislation, too, that we might have to work through during the future. As we know, streets are tight. People park on the roads. We can't get fire trucks and ambulances down there. So there's some things that we are working on with PGM, with DES, and we all collectively, we know what we want, right? Getting to the finish line sometimes is harder than what we say. One of the other things that we're working on looking at is a public safety impact fee to address public safety needs and amend the rural fire suppression ordinance to include the maintenance and repairs of tanks and dry hydrants. So these are our non-hydrant areas that 20 years ago, they put in steel tanks in the ground. The steel tanks are failing. There's nothing in writing on how these get replaced.
Be a part of the fire tax and managed in the way that the fire tax is, or you're talking about from the county side?
We're looking at on the county side. Okay. So we're doing the work with PGM right now. The envision that we have and that we've put towards, and I've presented a little bit of this to the commissioners already, as well as PGM, is that people are paying the taxes. If you lived in Waldorf and you had a fire hydrant in front of your house and a car hit that hydrant, the county's coming out replacing it, probably within 48 to 72 hours. If you lived out in the Densville community and this steel tank fails in the ground, there's nothing for that to be replaced. So that is a infrastructure that we feel that the county needs to be responsible for to make sure that those people in those communities are getting the same type of service as everyone else is. So we want to expand our working relationship within other county government agencies, most notably inspections. We want to work on identifying vacant homes. And this is in an effort to an incident that we just had in Charles County where 3 of our firefighters fell through a floor into a basement on a vacant house that they did not know was vacant at the time. We were fortunate that those 3 firefighters were rescued. We did have one that was injured. He was actually from St. Mary's County because it was in the Hughesville area where we get some mutual aid support from them. So we want to get our foot in the door to work with these other agencies so that way we kind of, our voice is heard. And that goes in line with the next one that says, get a seat at the table for all things related to fire and EMS within county government. We are an outside agency. Sometimes we are viewed as that. And sometimes when things come out, we are forgotten about. We are fortunate that if things make it across the desk of either Director Lilly or Deputy Director Rose, they include us immediately on it. However, there have been occasions where that doesn't happen, and things will occur in this county without fire and EMS knowing. We want to improve our IT services and add personnel dedicated to IT for fire and EMS, just as the Sheriff's Department has done, and they've been successful with that. And finally, we need to be more competitive with surrounding counties' recruitment and retention programs. So we lose volunteers in this county; they'll go to other counties, and as odd as it may sound, it's hard to find somebody to do something for free anymore. That's just that is the reality, right? So, yeah. So, and to paint the picture is, Calvert County, they were successful with implementing a child care reimbursement program so that their children can attend daycare or some type of schooling system while they're younger. That gets reimbursed to the volunteer. They have a $2,500 property tax credit. Their low SAP collection is at the age of 50. They do annual volunteer appreciation days where they show up to the fairgrounds. They can win TVs, PlayStations. They pay for food, crab feast, whatever it may be. So that's something that we don't currently do. Those are things we are trying to work. We've tried some of those things. We've even tried using some of our own money to do that. But we were, told with the fire tax, the way Chapter 54 is written, you can only do certain things with that money. So additionally, we want to discuss the need for funding increases. I mean, there's just no way of beating around the bush anymore. Our last budget meeting, we increased the lifespan of all the apparatus in this county by 3 to 5 years to ensure that we could meet the needs of the current operating cost. So, as I stated earlier, we've tightly managed our money with the same income or the same percentage of the income for years. And finally, most importantly, we want to continue to provide professional fire and rescue EMS services to the citizens and the visitors of Charles County.
Mr. Kaufman, I have to say, and thank you. I mean, and Mr. Lewis too. Thank you for this. It's a lot of information. I think it's a lot for us to process, and I think this is like a foundational meeting for us. I got to say though, looking at the future, a lot of the things that you described for the future, you described, expanding your working relationship across a number of different departments, right?
Correct.
Within
yes.
county government. You described PGM, obviously, emergency services, which you have a great relationship with. You have to. And I think you mentioned a few other agencies. You described having a seat at the table, a voice, expanded budget, or at least resources. A lot of that, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, a lot of that screams, should we also have a director of fire under the county that might be able to bring all that together and maybe negotiate in a different way or work in a different way with the county department and agencies. And we have it now with emergency services. So is there legacy fire department sort of familiarity and home issues that make that not attractive for you? Are you open to the idea of a county fire chief? There was a 2019 analysis by a consulting firm that said, our volunteer system is performing well, and I think it even said probably better than some other jurisdictions when it comes to response times and success rates. But that consultant still recommended that we have a county fire director and an emergency services director. So, have you all been thinking about that set of recommendations? Are you, I don't want to say resistant, because I don't think this is what this conversation is, but how do you respond to sort of the idea that we could have or should consider a county fire director?
Yeah, so going back to that comprehensive study, so that whole document was reviewed by county government, DES, volunteers, and everything was looked at. Who had the ownership of what the path forward might look like, or what it should look like, and even that matter. And we've discussed merging the associations together and looking at putting somebody in charge. Where that came from really hasn't been talked about, looked at really, because that was obviously other things come about. So, things get pushed back and other things get pushed back. But it is on the radar. And I know that it says that, and I don't quote me to it, but I don't remember if it said that the ownership of somebody being in charge was on the volunteers or the county itself. But it is something that it has been discussed on our end. And it has been discussed with the Department of Emergency Services as well. What does this look like moving forward?
I'm sorry, board, and I know I've talked a lot, and we can ask some other questions, but when we describe, help me out here, when we describe a county fire director and county support, we're talking a dual system. We're not talking a county takeover or county ownership.
Sure, yeah.
We're talking a dual system that functions together like you function right now together with the Department of Emergency Services. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that a fair
Yeah.
description?
For the most part, yes. So, anything related to the fire service in Charles County, and if the county had questions or, whatever it may be, they're bringing me to the table right now, right? So every day it's multiple phone calls, emails with, Director Lilly, Deputy Director Rose, whoever it may be. And right now, if you had to say somebody was doing that role, that's exactly what I do on a daily basis. And so, I'm just not getting paid, right? So, let's just, and I'm not asking, and by no means.
He didn't mean to bring that up.
Right.
But
And I'm not asking to be paid. So I've received like the LoSAP points for the duties that I do. I attend the meetings. I represent the volunteers in every capacity that's asked out of me. Is it a lot of work? Absolutely. It's rewarding because I get to a point to where, I know what we're doing this for, right? We're doing this for the community. We're doing this for the volunteers. That's what we're in it for. There's no egos in this. If you went back even 15, 20 years ago, you might have seen a lot of individualism in Charles County. It's not there anymore in fire and EMS. It doesn't matter if it's career or volunteer. The voice is one. We're united moving forward. And if we ever got into a position where we needed the help, we're coming to ask for help, just as EMS did. Right now, as the volunteer fire side, and I can only speak for fire, I'm not going to step out of my lane. As even the comprehensive study said, we have one of the better volunteer systems. And even since that study was done, we've made vast improvements to make it better, and we continue to make it better every day as we move forward and we make changes, because our number one goal is obviously, we're here to protect the citizens and the visitors of the county, but we also have an obligation to our people to keep them safe, make sure we're doing everything right for them so they go home to their families too, because they're doing this for free as well.
Thank you for that. And I think that the reason we raised that question was because when you bring someone up to talk to you, you want to be able to ask someone what is the issue, and you want to bring up that person. Rather you have someone behind you that you can talk to the EMS, and you can report, the person behind you can ask them that question. But I want to talk to that one person. What's going on with fire and EMS?
Correct.
So you can actually bring that information up. So that's the question that they ask. And so I think that when in the real world, that's how it's operated. And so I don't think it's no different from anything else or who it is we bring up. It's just that one point, a single point of person we want to talk to. So that's the question that was phrased.
And I understand. We have that. So, that's me, right? Yes. But just like any other organization, there's a deputy underneath of me. So me, I travel almost every weekend because my kids play travel hockey. So I'm all up and down the East Coast. So we have we have people below us who fill our roles just as in any other organization. So if, for example, I was in Canada last week, when I'm not here, the deputy, he's the guy, right? That's the face of our organization. And if, somebody needed an answer or something, that's who they're going to.
So the question I have to ask is, this is a two-part question. It's to the volunteers, the fire and EMS leaders. Has the volunteers, fire and EMS leaders completed a 5-year review plan?
So the last plan we did was the comprehensive study. The one before that was in '95, actually, I believe it was. So we make, as in the comprehensive plan, we review that actually every year to find out what pieces of it we still need to accomplish, or if there are things we're going to do, or that are even feasible for us to do.
Okay.
So every year, we review the previous whatever comprehensive plan was done to do that. Moving forward, once that's complete, that was part of one of the things we want to do moving forward in the future is create midterm and long-term plans to make sure we're staying on track. And a lot of times also we're kind of reactive to things, and that's in probably any public safety field where, industry changes, whatever it may be. So sometimes following a plan isn't always the best course of action. We have to be reactive to the way things are changing and change business that way.
Okay.
So it's very, very fluent in that aspect because, yes, we have plans, we have things moving forward, but also there's times we have to deviate from that because other things come about that would take, precedence over that.
Okay. The other part is to the county, the CAO. Has the county completed the 5-year review plan? Has the county done?
So I'm stepping in for Deb Hall, and if Deb Hall were here, she may be able to answer that directly. So I'm going to have to bring that back to her, and we can follow up with that response.
Okay. That concludes my question. Thanks.
Yes, I do have a question, and it relates more to my understanding of the cadet training program and the one. Explain to me the training that a first-time volunteer gets, regardless of their age.
So the first step is you join the station. You'll fill out an application. You'll go. There's a background check. Obviously, make sure you're not a wanted criminal. There's some in-station training that they'll start before they'll go and they'll sign up for Fire One. If they're in the fire department, they'll sign up what's called Firefighter One class through the University of Maryland Fire and Rescue.
Is that done here or somewhere else?
So there's a campus here in La Plata.
Okay,
that's actually right behind the Emergency Services Building by La Plata High School. So I believe that class now is up to 160 hours.
200. Oh,
for fire. I know EMS is in the 200s now. And they'll attend that class usually like on a Tuesday, Thursday evening, and sometimes Saturday and Sundays. And then they successfully complete that course, and that's the minimum requirement to be a firefighter, a certified firefighter, to be able to go inside burning buildings. And during that course, they can be doing things in the station to get turned over to ride apparatus and just kind of be an observer or help out on certain things on the fire side. So after that, there are plenty of other courses they can take. There's a Firefighter 2 training class. Once you complete that, then there's fire officer training. There's rescue technician discipline training that they can take. There's fire inspection training, fire instructor training. The courses are, I don't want to say endless, but there's a lot of them. And if it's somebody who wants to move through the ranks and become an officer, a department officer, a chief officer, whatever it may be, they have to complete those officer training classes, as well as some of the stuff that's in county that they'll have to do as well, working in their departments and working with their leadership to get turned over to ride apparatus.
So those more advanced training programs that you're talking about, are they given in the county, or do they have to go to like College Park, wherever
they are? Yeah. So there's so there are those types of classes are all driven by University of Maryland.
That's what I thought.
So
I get it.
we work with the training center director down here to bring in classes into the county that we know our people want. Every semester that they do, they submit a piece. We push a paper out asking for the departments to ask their members what training they're looking for, and then we'll hold that training down here to try to alleviate our people having to go to College Park or, the Eastern Shore, wherever it may be.
So is there tuition charged for those programs?
No, all that training is free.
So it would seem to me, from an expansion standpoint, that we've got this amazing tech campus in Hughesville. You mentioned there were two things that Charles County was number one in historically. What are they? They were the first.
The first radio dispatch communication center.
And
the other one was we were the third in the state to do a retirement program for the volunteers.
okay, well, all right. With that being said, that's marketable, and it would seem like you would have an opportunity to recruit students that might go all over the state or East Coast to tie it in with our tech program and charge tuition that whether the jurisdictions or the student themselves are willing to pay for, because when you're the first of something, it becomes part of your reputation.
I understand, and so the training we received through the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute, and that's all driven through University of Maryland. Those programs are funded by bridge tolls, so that's how they're able to offer free training to volunteers, and that we've always used that as a marketing thing. If you come to us, we're going to give you free. Mm-hmm. We don't ask people to come and volunteer their time and pay money to do training. There's even other trainings that you could take, specialty command courses or something that's called FDIC that they hold in Annapolis every year. If departments want to send members to those types of training, we pay for that out of our training account money that they have individually, and we get that back through the tax money. That all has to be approved through the process as well. So we can pay for those people to go to training, but we've never asked anybody to pay for their own training.
Okay.
Okay, I have just a couple of questions. So you mentioned working with the county regarding inspections. These are your future plans, inspections with PGM specifically?
Yes, ma'am.
And vacant homes, and understanding where these vacant homes are located due to a serious occurrence recently.
Yes.
In particular. Who in your division currently works with planning and growth management and our commissioners regarding the comprehensive plan? And I don't want to ask the county, because if Deb Hall was here, I would ask her specifically and ask you as well. So based on your experience, what has that been like? You talk about wanting to get to the table, to have these robust conversations about growth, about the needs of citizens in the community and budget and all of that. Who on your side represents your group?
So right now it's myself and my deputy. We kind of work in we'll call it a subgroup of PGM with the Department of Emergency Services that addresses our needs and concerns right now. As far as the big comprehensive piece of it, we're not a part of that. I don't know if the emergency services community, I don't know if Director Lilly or Deputy Director Rose is actually a part of that either.
So that's something that we really, I would like more information as a board member to find out how the county participates in that and engaging our fire and EMS, please. And then I have another question. This is actually to the county. What liability is the county under for property loss, injury, and those firefighters that pay the ultimate sacrifice currently?
I'm going to have to look that one up. I addressed that question several years ago. I'm going to have to look that up to make sure it is that I give you complete information in terms of the liability and the applicability of what it is that what we cover for our fire, rescue, and EMS.
Okay.
Can I jump off that for one quick second? I mean, there was this tragic fire in South Carolina in Charleston, a furniture store that, I don't know if it was 10 firefighters. It was a large number of firefighters that lost their lives because of not knowing what was in there, how flammable the contents were. And I don't know if that was a city of Charleston career or if that was volunteer, but I think there was a lot of, looking back at who's liable, who's responsible. And I think there's other jurisdictions since then that have looked at, okay, we need to have a county fire chief because ultimately the taxpayer is going to be responsible, especially if that that residential or commercial property might not be able to cover those losses. At the end of the day, the county may be responsible. So I think that's one question that we're curious about is we have this awesome volunteer service that has protected our county, but what happens if you all putting your lives on the line, something happens or something happens to the equipment? Does it fall back to the county?
So as far as insurance goes, we are participants with the local government insurance trust. As to the particulars of the coverage, I can't answer that right now, but I've written that down so that I can make sure that we present that information to you at the next hearing.
And I just want to expand a little bit further again. First of all, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I really, really
Yes, ma'am.
appreciate you.
I know it was a lot of information in a short time,
No. And you walked us through it, and I really, really appreciate it. I want to talk to you about something else afterwards. However, because my mind is going. However, you've come and you're sitting before this board. What are your asks? We're considering a charter form of government. What are your asks to this board?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's much of an ask as much as it was to just kind of show you what we do. And I know there's a lot of unanswered questions with the charter. I'm not familiar a whole lot with it myself, honestly. But I know this group is obviously serious about the task that they've been given, and you need all the information moving forward, right? What it is that the volunteers do. Obviously, we want to paint the picture that, we help save the government money. Is it going to look like that 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? Nobody knows. Back in 95, as we obviously talked about, there was a need for career EMS. There's still a need for them, and there's still a growing need for them. And moving forward, we just want to make sure that all things considered with the charter board, we view it as if you're investing in what you have now, maybe it will save money down the road. And I think that that's probably one of the bigger things. If I had to say that there was an ask, is I would ask that, and we've been asking the county for a while to look at this, is invest in the volunteers now, right? If we invest in them now, maybe if we would invest in them more in 95, we wouldn't be as far as we are now needing to pay out that extra tax money. Paying salaries, paying benefits and all that, it's a lot of money. Where if we just gave a fraction, whatever it may be, a little bit of money towards a recruitment or a retention effort to keep the current volunteers in place, it could go a long way down the road for the charter, if the charter comes to be, or whatever government comes to be. Then, it keeps the tradition in the county, and it saves a lot of money to the taxpayers. And I think that that's the biggest thing, right? And that's obviously on any taxpayer's mind, right? We all pay taxes. We don't want to pay more than what we have to. And you guys have asked a lot of good questions and a lot of questions about, the insurance stuff and all that. And, those are all definitely need to knows. But moving forward, if this system stays the way it is and we invest in what we have, it's going to save a lot of money.
Yeah, and I'm just going to piggyback off of Chief Kaufman. I just like to support, right, to support the volunteers, because the volunteer system is not going anywhere, right? They're here to stay. And I know for a fact that they're really trying their hardest to do what we can, what we have. Whether we're just asking for more support financially, right, whatever that looks like. I'm definitely support is the biggest thing that we would recommend. I would like to, on the EMS wise as well. So.
Enough around, but I'm going to say my last question. Okay, my last question is, As the county population and call volumes increase, what plans are for the new fire and EMS station recommendation in the 2012 report?
Oh, it was 2019.
I'm sorry, 2019 report.
Was it Pinefield? There was a few
So
others.
Pinefield is currently in the works, is in the pipeline. That's through the Department of Emergency Services, putting EMS services there. It's still undetermined on any fire service moving into that building because we would have to split Waldorf again, which has already been done once. So right now, currently, the only plan there is for EMS. We completed standing up a fire station in the Dennisville community, which filled a huge gap in our fire protection service that we provided. I believe one of the other ones was the Bennsville area, and that is also being looked at. There are no plans in place. One of the things that we went back to PGM with in conjunction with Department of Emergency Services was discussing about anything that we could put in writing that would allow these developers to give us land for free, essentially, if we could, to stand up fire and EMS stations or whatever, maybe EMS stations, fire-only stations, whatever the map looks like when we go to look at what we call the red zones, if where our gap coverage is, to maybe save some money. And I don't know where that currently stands. That would be a question you'd have to ask Michelle when she's in the hot seat. But that was definitely something that we did push back, was to say, moving forward, we know that the plan says if these areas continue to develop, that we are going to be responsible for standing up additional services. And what does that look like? So that is on the radar. The first step was obviously is because we struggled to find land when we wanted to put a unit up north in Waldorf. I mean, it's starting to get locked up pretty quickly. So we figured going through developers was probably the best bet. Other emergency services communities have done that and have been successful. So that is something that we definitely have on the radar.
Who's servicing the Bennsville area? Is that Bryan's Road and Westlake?
That would be the area that if you come out of Westlake going towards Bryan's Road, Billingsley Road, Bennsville Road, that area.
Are those the two firehouses?
Westlake and Bryan's Road.
Yeah, Westlake. There's Westlake, Bryan's Road, and actually in the center of them right now, on Marshall's Corner Road, just past Pomfret Road, is the dive team station.
Mm-hmm. And
I'm gonna say one more thing. You got additional volunteers there, right? You're gonna have additional volunteers there?
Yes. So if we were to ever stand up any additional service, just like we did for the Dennisville community, there's actually in our bylaws for the associations that says you have to have a minimum amount of certified people. They have to meet all the standards and everything. So like when we did it for Dennisville was actually kind of, we did it temporarily. The state highway did bridge work on 234 and Route 6 at the same exact time. That would shut those two roads down for up to 5 to 10 minutes. So if we had apparatus responding on a one-lane bridge and they had to stop and wait for 10 minutes, so we kind of came up with this plan. We were temporarily going to put service out there. We had a lot of volunteers from other stations that lived in that community. So while we did that, it was very successful. And in turn, it led to the creation of that actual station. So they met the minimum requirements, minimum standards. If we did not have that, we would not be able to upstand any new station.
Just one, and this is more of an ask, I think, but I wanted to make sure you hear it so you can kind of tell me or us if this is going in the right direction. I know that other counties look at sort of developer impact fees, and I know you mentioned that in your presentation. I know Virginia has a proffer process, which every developer has to look at how their development might impact schools, among other things, fire and EMS, police. I was just curious to see if we could work together to figure out what those look like in other counties and compare to what's in existence for Charles County, and then maybe bring that as part of a discussion when we get into a little bit more of the technical side of how the financing might work.
any other questions from board members? This discussion went longer than we typically go, but it was important. We're learning again, we have a few folks here that know this space, but for many of us, we don't. So I'm glad, you spent the time with us. And I think the thing that I'm going to ask is, we've stood up 2 working groups to kind of dig through issues and then present them back to the board. We stood up an executive working group and a budget working group, which Chris is alluding to in some of that information on impact fees. But I think we will stand up a fire and EMS working group with a small number of folks that I hope can continue to use you as a resource and perhaps even a partner or stakeholder that's giving us some feedback, perhaps some suggestions that we can kind of build into whatever product we produce. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but I say all that to say that we'll be in constant contact with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime the presentation has our email and cell phone on there, it's on all the time. You can ask my wife. So it rings a lot. But yeah, absolutely. We would love to be a part of that. We would love to be a part of, future discussions. And, we're always available to the board to answer any questions or even come back if you need us to. If you have something else you need us to kind of be more detailed about, we'll be more than happy to bring that back to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you both. We really appreciate
Thank you all
it.
for the time.
Lewis and Mr. Kaufman, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
You did
Thank
a
you.
great job.
Thank you very much.
Really, really good job.
We are running a bit behind. Briefly, was there any comment from the board on what we heard, or do we want to assign the working group and we can continue to discuss fire and EMS issues in a very small setting to kind of synthesize what we heard and then present it in the open setting to the board for the board to then comment on and edit and make recommendations. If we want to move with a working group, I would like to volunteer people again. If there's objections, that's fine. But looking at our backgrounds and just to have a little bit of diversity in the type of eyes that are looking at it and with their experience, I was really hoping this could be a working group that Sarah, with her experience in Charles County, with Mr. Michael White, with his experience both in Charles and Prince George's County, and with Ms. Cheryl Box, in a very, small setting, just to discuss what we heard, synthesize it, put some things down on paper as far as ideas, and then present in an open setting those ideas back to us. And I think this will probably happen in the late September, October timeframe once we get through some of our additional guest speakers. That way you have some time to just talk. This is what we heard. This is what the different questions were. This is where we think the board was going, and then just present it back. And if that sounds acceptable to Sarah, Michael, and Cheryl, I'd like to start working on that.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. And I don't think we didn't do a motion for this last time. As long as you all are okay being voluntold. And
Chair, I have to intervene. You would need a motion.
is there a motion to approve the fire and EMS working group of Sarah, Michael, and Cheryl?
And I would have to object to that because I would have to say it has to be a person that's on the board, and Mr. White could be added to the working group because he's an alternate, and you cannot add an alternate without adding the 3 people that's actually currently on the board. You have to give ask the people that's on the board first if they want to be asked to be on that committee first. If they do not want to be on that board, and then Mr. White can be on that board. So if the 3 people decline, the extra person decline, then Mr. White can be on there. But if those 3 people want to be on there, then you can say Mr. White can be added to it as that 4th person.
That's a fair comment. Any additional discussion? Any additional comment on that?
I agree.
All right. Are there any others that are on the board that would like to participate in a small working group to synthesize what the board heard from fire and EMS? Ramonda's on there as well. She did join us. Yeah, she's there. Any other board members looking to volunteer for the working group? And going forward, we're also going to have a council. We'll likely have a council working group, and perhaps a transition one as well. Seeing no other volunteers, is there a motion to add Michael White as an alternate to the working group?
I move to add Michael White to the board, to the working group.
Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And thank you all. We will have a fire EMS working group with the named staffers. And Daughtry, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I think, I don't know if you wanted to make Ms. Lilly available to them for any questions or information that they may have.
Absolutely. So, Ms. Lilly, you will probably get a communication from the group, just as there's some other county staff that are receiving some communication from the budget and the executive working group as well. So we thank you in advance. And I can't promise that there also won't be a larger meeting at some point with the full board. To that point, I wanted to ask both Daughtry and Chris, did they have any updates that they wanted to share from some of the conversations from the executive working group and the budget working group? Ms. Daughtry?
Yes, we did meet Sarah and Romana. We all met last Wednesday and yesterday. We actually completed our assignment, and it was we completed. It was great, and we will be glad to share it when the time is permitted. I think we had a great discussion.
Yeah, I think it went really well. It was just very productive, and we just kept going, and we finished. So, yeah.
That's a great update. Chris, did you have something for the budget group?
I did. We did not complete the assignment.
Dare you?
But Greg, Eileen, and I met, and we discussed some of the measures that we could take related to transparency and making that process have oversight, and looking at some of the things that the other jurisdictions have done. I think we also decided that it would be great for us to connect with the Budget and Finance Office for the county, so to kind of talk about some of those ideas, look at how that would be implemented and ultimately would sort of impact their day-to-day work and bringing more oversight and transparency to the process. So, we'll be working with the county to schedule that meeting and really sort of discuss those ideas in detail, and then bring them to the group for a larger discussion.
Chris, if you don't mind me adding to that, one of the things that we wanted to ask county was, as we look at the budget costs, the fiscal impact of having a separate executive branch and a separate council, we noticed on the budget division's website there is information on salary cost by type of position or grade of position, but it would be very helpful if you all could provide to us what the positions and salary costs are for the commissioner's suite of staff, if it's organized that way. When I looked on the site, everything's ordered by grade, and I could do some process of elimination and try to figure out which positions are in sort of the commissioner's wing. But if you all could organize that for us so we can see what the commissioner's suite is, and then I think if we get that, I think Chris, Eileen, and I can then say what type of crosswalk can we put together to show what an executive wing looks like and a commissioner's wing, and what are the additional pieces that are needed, and perhaps even some savings on the council side. So I think that would be very useful information. And I know we can contact Jake directly, and we will meet with Jake at some point. But just so the public knows, these working groups are so we can, again, take the information that we heard, package it, and then everyone will see it, the board and the public, at a future meeting of here's a draft for us to consider and then decide upon as a group. And next meeting, we're going to hear from Jan Gardner, the first ever county executive from Frederick County, Maryland, former commissioner president when they were commissioner form, former commissioner. Then she was two-term county executive. She's going to have great perspective. In September, we'll hear from Sheriff Barry. And then after that, that will give enough time for these working groups to present drafts and us to have a technical, detailed conversation on what could our charter look like after going through all the guest speakers.
I forgot to say, we will also need to talk to the attorney about under the executive section 409. We need some clarification under 409. That's what I forgot to say. Yes. So we will reach out to you and ask you about 409. Thank you.
Thank you. So those are some old business items. I know they weren't here on the agenda. The other item that we have for old business was Maryland law regarding local legislative body adding to the county executive's proposed budget, something that we've already talked about in Chris's group. But Mr. Potter, you might have an update for us on that.
So I do actually have an update this time. So I wanted to start this by saying thank you all for your patience as the county has helped facilitate this process. Keep the questions coming, please. We will do the very best that we can to answer them on the spot, but also please recognize that we'd like to provide as accurate information as possible, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So with that said, I have been able to speak with Ms. Mitchell as to the research on this topic, which the question was whether a county is prohibited from including a charter provision that allows for a council to increase the county's budget. And she said that there's she couldn't find any Maryland law that speaks to such a prohibition, and actually in support in the other direction of saying, yes, the council could affect the budget. Baltimore City's charter has an amendment from 2020 which allows for the city council to both reduce and increase the spending in the city budget, so long as those additions do not exceed reductions. So that kind of goes to what Ms. Deb Hall had alluded to in the previous meeting as to not boxing in the county executive so as, you know, they wouldn't be able to do anything with the budget without any, you know, tax cuts or tax increases, that sort of thing. So just keep that in mind, but to answer your question, yes, the county council would be able to increase the budget.
I think Chris mentioned Baltimore City in the past. You said that was 2020.
That's correct. And the specific provision was Article 6, Section 7. So for the budget group to look at that language specifically for reference, maybe a springboard.
Yeah. No,
I was going to say, can they send that to us?
Yeah, I think we have Baltimore County, but I don't think we have Baltimore City in our.
And I can make sure that that provision gets to that group.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I think that's what we have for old business. For new business, I think I kind of short-circuited that. We have our upcoming schedule of meetings. Again, confirming that we will hear from Frederick's first ever two-term county executive, Jan Gardner. She was term limited under their charter, so she's no longer serving there, but I think she'll be a great resource for us to talk about how Frederick transitioned from commissioner form to charter form. And is there any other discussion before we turn to public comment? Nope. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Dotter, you did have one item that you wanted to bring up.
I wanted to bring up an item that I would be remiss not to bring this up. This happened to me about a couple of weeks ago. I received a call from the county about a call to call my job from the Department of Defense, the Office of Special Counsel. Apparently someone called the hacked office, the Office of Special Counsel, and said that I ran for election to get on this charter board. and they did a full investigation on me for my job. And of course, it came back to be negative. But the reason I'm bringing it up is this was pure intimidation and harassment. And we were appointed to be on this board to do a job. And I want to be able to be a resident, volunteer for a board, and to do what the commissioners has asked us to do. And I don't want anyone on the board to be able to go through anything as I went through this couple of weeks. So that's why I'm bringing it up, to prevent someone else from going through it. Because the reason I believe it happened is it's an intimidation and it's harassment for me to be able to remove myself from the board. And I want it to be stopped and to let us be done. So I'm bringing it to her attention so it will not happen to anyone else on the board. And I'm just going to leave it just like that.
It happened to me too.
Anyone else? I mean, I'll say that I also had an anonymous complaint that I violated the Hatch Act by serving on this board. Office of Special Counsel contacted me through the county. They didn't know that, I'm a legislative branch employee. The Hatch Act does not apply to me, period. But also, this board is not political, right? There's no partisan activity here. So the Hatch Act also does not apply. And I was cleared before I even was appointed to the board by the House Ethics Committee, because I want to be careful. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm sorry, Cheryl. Sorry, Daughtery. And it's not going to make you feel any better, but I will tell you that I'm proud so far that we're hearing from people such as Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Lewis, such as former administrators and current council manager, from the executives that we're going to hear from going forward. And I think we're taking this seriously. I know I am. I know my board members are. And I'll just say, if it might not make you feel better, but if people are resorting to harassment or intimidation or chilling effects instead of arguing about the merits, I think my spidey senses say we're probably doing something right. We're doing something right because we're taking it serious and we're hearing from people, and we'll hear from the public starting in November as well, in addition to these public comments as far as our public hearings. So I'm sorry that you all are going through that. I'm going to submit mine to the county. Actually, I emailed it to the county just so they can have the clearance letter, but we shouldn't have had to go through that. So, yeah. So with that, let's move to public comment. I'm going to read a short statement for our public comment period. The Charter Board will receive public comments as a part of the normal agenda for this meeting today. Each speaker will be called to share their comments in the order that they signed up and will be limited to 3 minutes, after which the clerk will call the next person on the list. Board members will not provide any response to public comments or engage in dialogue with speakers. The time is allocated only for listening to feedback, not for answering questions or responding to concerns that are raised. However, please be assured that the board will take every comment into consideration during its work sessions. All board members, guests, and members of the public will follow the code of civility. And if the public would like to submit written comments, and we've been fortunate to have received written comments that have really picked up since the last few meetings, and I think we all appreciate that, please visit our meeting agenda page on the county's website and click comment next to the current agenda. And with that, Ms. Jessie, do we have any registered speakers?
So we do not have any online registered speakers, but we do have one in-person speaker signed up, Mr. Terry. Mr. Terry, if you want to come up to the presenter's table and just please make sure that the light is green before you speak into the microphone.
Greetings, committee, chair, vice chair, members of the board, and specifically our Charles County citizens. My name is Derek Terry. My family and I have resided in Waldorf, Maryland since 2006. And although we might not be lifelong residents, we have been paying taxes for Charles County elected officials to use for the betterment of Charles County. In life, we use, overuse, or underuse the term process. Process is defined as a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. In this case, we have an appointed Charles County Charter Board selected by a simple majority of county commissioners. The board is tasked to do the following: draft a charter that will change the present code home rule form of government to charter form of government for Charles County. The proposed charter will then go before the voters for ratification at the 2024 general election. The proposed charter shall include, but not limited to, the duties, power, rules, procedures, and structure of local government. Some of our county commissioners seem to have forgotten the same process they preach about during their commissioner meetings, social media, or town halls. In my opinion, they are tainting the charter board process and not allowing the appointed board charter board members to do the job that you were appointed to do. They have claimed the board appointments are politically motivated, while conveniently forgetting they have done the same thing with various other boards. I would challenge this as a potential ethics violation due to the amount of misinformation which has been shared on social media, town halls, and even in commissioner board meetings. And all this without even waiting for the proposed charter to be presented. I would also challenge them to have that same vigor when it comes to their premature disagreements with other commissioner-appointed boards. Instead, they go back and forth with some board members on an issue that will be decided by the tax-paying voter. They are stating in this potential charter that it will cost taxpayers additional monies, but they have no problem spending $1 million and counting tax dollars on a legal dispute against another commissioner versus creating a more suitable, accountable form of government. In our current form of government, there has been a total disregard for Robert's Rule of Order, parliamentary procedure, and HR practices that this administration has yet to solve because the citizens don't control the meetings, nor do we monopolize the time with personal vendetta or cat-dog fights over feelings. This board, meaning the charter board, has conducted themselves professionally and demonstrated how to approach different opinions and strategies without personal attacks, and you should be commended regardless of whether you support or you're for the new charter. For myself, I have a hard time trying to understand the reluctance to change, considering Charles County has more people moving in who, like myself, were accustomed to a charter form of government. And to most surprise, I didn't even know that we were functioning in this, what I consider an archaic form of government. So this is my proposal. And specifically, as the citizens are watching this, allow the charter board to do their job. Follow the same process you would expect of others, be respectful of one another, and allow the voters to decide at the polls whether they are against or for the new charter form of government. In closing, I implore county staff as well as citizens listening to my voice to allow this board to present a charter that reflects the needs of the community. Please come back and speak to the board. Ask questions, educate yourself, and be engaged in this process as well as all other aspects of government. And if I could just have a few seconds of personal privilege, I want to thank each member of the charter board because you provided various possible functions of a proposed charter in a responsible and detailed way in order to draft a charter that takes into account fiscal responsibility or the fiscal impact. What I will say is that you're allowing voters to make an educated decision whether or not they're for or against, and you should be allowed to do your job without any misinformation or intimidation. I won't be affected by the hat, Jack, but because that's what you were appointed to do. And I hope this message is clear to some commissioners as well as citizens who come before you when either they're for or against. Do your job. We haven't even seen it yet. And that's probably the biggest issue I have, is that you're complaining without even knowing what you're complaining about. And I just encourage you to stay encouraged. And I'm not saying whether or not I'm for or against, but I am for the process. And as you go through the process, eventually you will hear more. But I thank you for your time, because I know y'all are tired as I am. But thank you.
And Ms. Jessie, was that the only speaker for today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Have a good night, everybody.